Hello, comrades, and welcome back to Ushanka Show. Stories about life in the Soviet Union. Здравствуйте, дорогие товарищи. В эфире программа Ushanka Show. In today's video, we're going to talk about Soviet housing and Soviet memes. Kind of interesting combination. If you follow my channel, you probably know by now that I receive a lot of flack from the far left and from the far right. People think that I'm a Soviet romanticizer, pseudo-commie, and also they call me that I'm a capitalist pig. But I promised you we're going to talk about Soviet housing today, and one of my old videos that I recorded a couple of years ago, The Curse and the Joy of the Soviet Free Housing, recently got noticed by YouTube algorithm, and that video really took off. And I began receiving a lot of comments like this one. It amazed me to this day that people still advocate for socialism and communism. And it's true, a lot of people in the West, especially younger generation, are very interested in socialism concept, and they think that Soviet Union was a great country that provided there's people with free housing, first of all, and then other freebies like education and healthcare. And when I try to join the conversation, mostly on Reddit, it usually doesn't go really well for me. I get instantly banned from many R groups like R late stage capitalism, R communism, R socialism. As long as I start telling my story, those guys are not happy what I say and they ban me. So obviously what we have here is the failure to communicate to the younger generation about all the joys of life in the Soviet Union. I don't know if it's gonna make you feel any better, but there's plenty of people in the former Soviet Union republics, people like my generation, and usually older people, that truly miss Soviet Union. And I don't know if they miss them being young or they miss something else, but we call them Sovka-drochery. So that's the people who get the raging boner every time they think about life in the Soviet Union. And there are plenty of groups, I Miss USSR, on Facebook and of course on the Russian social networks, that these people share their memories, their pictures, their recollection of a good life in the Soviet Union, how everything was great, and stuff like that. And they share this meme a lot. It's one of their favorite memes ever. And of course you probably recognize it's Leonid Brezhnev. And it says: «За время правления Брежнева 18 лет бесплатные квартиры получили 164 миллиона человек». And translation will be: during the rule of Leonid Brezhnev, 18 years, free apartments were received by 164 million people. First of all, let's talk about 18 years. Imagine a person was born, grew up, and probably could even have a kid at the age of 18, kind of early, and they'll be still the same president in the country. Imagine Barack Obama was doing change in the United States for 18 years, or Donald Trump was making America great again for 18 years. That's a long time, but for the people who grew up in the Soviet Union, was totally normal. They don't mind that. And of course I have to say something about free apartments. Our apartments weren't free. We were paying rent. It was called kvartplata, kvartirная plata, so it's apartment payment. And as you see at this photo, the very first line, 5 rubles 45 kopecks, that's your kvartplata. And below there goes heating, water, electricity, radio, natural gas, hot water, collective antenna, and total for a month 21 ruble and 62 kopecks. So there is a kvartplata, so this is rent and utilities. And as I mentioned many times, the average salary in the Soviet Union was about 150, 180 rubles per month. So if we say if you're making $1,800 per month, you will pay for your apartment $210, apartment rent and utilities. So it is definitely cheap, but it's not free. So honestly, I'm not sure why Sovka-drochery repeat exactly same silly stuff as the kids in the West, that in Soviet Union we had free housing. We did not. We had to pay kvartplata. But what I really wanted to do in this video is to concentrate on the number 164 million people received apartments. So that's a number. Let's believe it and let's look at it and analyze it. So 164 million people sounds like a lot of people got apartments, but you need to keep in mind it's 18 years of Leonid Brezhnev. So if you divide 164 million by 18 years, the number is actually 9.1 million people a year were receiving apartments. We still believe the numbers, so let's just go with it. And most of the time, it wasn't people receiving apartments, but families. and I would say average Soviet family maybe had four people. Let's call it 4 people. So you need to divide 9.1 by 4. So we're now dropping down to like what? About 2.5 million families received an apartment every year for 18 years of Brezhnev rule. And of course, there's another angle you can look at this number: 164 million people receive apartments. Does that mean that before 1964, 164 million of Soviet people did not have place to live? You know what I mean? So they had way worse living conditions before 1964 that only under Brezhnev they managed to improve their housing, they managed to improve their living condition. But here's the real kicker. During the Brezhnev rule, the population of the Soviet Union was an average about 250 million people. So 164 million people got apartments, while the total population of Soviet Union was 250 million. And now we can see that there's a serious problem with this number of 164 million people. With population of 250 million, total population of Soviet Union, 61% was city population, and the rest people live in the villages. In the villages, out in the country, no one built 9-story high Brezhnevka apartments. It was only in the cities and towns. 61% city population means 152 million people. So now there's the problem. 164 million people got apartments, while city population was around 152 million. So more people received apartments in the cities and towns than people that lived in cities and towns. So that number is definitely off. There's something wrong with that number. But it gets even better, because remember, there was a lot of construction going on before Leonid Brezhnev time, during Nikita Khrushchev rule, when he pushed to build in thousands this Khrushchevka 5-story high apartments. During the Khrushchev era, 68 million people got apartments. So now we could see that this math totally don't make any sense. With the city population of the Soviet Union around 152 million, during the Khrushchev time, 68 million got apartments. During following Brezhnev 18 years, another 164 million got apartments. So a total of 232 million city population got apartments, while population was only 152 million. So it's pretty much 80 million people that didn't exist, but they received apartments. So that number really, really off. So I did some digging, and the person who came up with this number of 164 million people during the Brezhnev time, he utilized this graph, which shows you construction during the Soviet Union from 1918 all the way to 1990. So he added 18 years of Brezhnev rule, and this is actually square meters in millions, and he divided by standard 9 square meters per person. So in the Soviet Union, there was a limit how big apartment you will get. So if your family is 3 people, you will get no more than 27 square meters apartment, and 9 square meters is 97 square feet per person. This graph is actually quite interesting, because you see the construction was done in like little steps, right? And each step has a landing of 5 years. So this is your 5-year plans. So they were planning to build so much housing, and that's what it stayed flat for 5 years. Then the new plan, they bumped it up. And there's a huge jump that occurred in 1956 from 48.1 million square meters. In 1955, it doubled to 94.8 in the following year, 1956. And honestly, I'm not sure if it's possible to double the construction from 48 million to 95 million square meters in 1 year. It looks more like it was planned, but I'm not sure if it's actually occurred. But still, this jump happened during the Khrushchev time, not Brezhnev time. And just a reminder, Leonid Brezhnev became the leader of Soviet Union in October 1964, so that's towards the end of the 6th 5-year plan. And you don't see the huge increase after he became the leader. It was just kind of gradually increasing. And I also wonder if this graph includes so-called cooperativные квартиры, cooperative apartments, like my parents ended up buying. So my family had a choice in the late 70s. We finally got this tiny apartment, and now we had a choice. So we wait for 20 years until it's my dad's turn to get an apartment through his place of work at the Kiev aircraft factory, or go ahead and buy cooperative apartment, but you had to pay 15,000 rubles, and my parents were making 300 rubles per month. So pretty much you just go on full Soviet mortgage and you get in debt for 15 years instead of waiting 20 years for so-called free apartment. And I'm not sure if this graph includes cooperativные квартиры, cooperative apartments, which were about 10% of total construction. I bet they did, but it shouldn't be included because you can't call cooperative apartments free apartments. They were actually a lot of money and super expensive. So as you see, if you have a little question attitude and a little bit of research and a little bit of knowledge, this amazing meme totally makes no sense. It's all made up. The number don't make any sense. The real number at least 50% less, because even after the end of the Soviet Union, the housing problem wasn't solved. There was still millions of people that lived in the barracks from 1930s, in the communal apartments, in dorms like my family used to live. So the housing problem wasn't solved completely, but looking at these numbers, you could tell, hey, it was done already during the Leonid Brezhnev time. But still, we need to give credit to the Soviet government. They did a lot to improve living conditions of Soviet people, especially credit to Nikita Khrushchev. He was the first one who said we need to build quick, cheap, and as much as possible to have people their own apartments. And of course, it got even better under Leonid Brezhnev. But you need to remember, no one else could build those apartments. We had no private investors, no private builders. It was a monopoly. Only Soviet government could build those apartment buildings. So that was their responsibility. And they did a lot, but still not enough. But once again, we're talking about construction in the cities and towns. Out in the villages, no one built apartment buildings. If their collective farm had some money, they could probably build some homes for young specialists. But usually it's just collective farm workers had to do themselves. They had to save money, purchase materials, and build those log cabins. Usually no running water, no bathrooms indoors, outhouse outside. They lived in those primitive conditions like existed, 100 years ago. Okay, my friends, that's all I have for you today. Thank you for watching Ushanka Show. I'm very excited. We just crossed 75,000 subscribers and even 76,000 subscribers. So thank you very much and welcome everyone who just joined Ushanka Show. And we'll talk to you soon. До свидания. Goodbye.